The king estate slept beneath a veil of quiet that felt almost holy. Even the marble floors seemed to hold their breath. Outside, snow whispered against the tall windows, tracing fragile veins of frost that shimmered in the early dawn. Bianca stood at the top of the grand staircase, her hand grazing the smooth oak banister. The silk of her dress caught the light like spilled moon water. To the world, she was the housemaid, modest, obedient, forgettable. But in truth, she was Mrs. Bianca King, the secret wife of one of America's most powerful men. The title never felt real, not when she ate breakfast alone, not when the staff avoided her gaze as if her existence was a rumor, and certainly not when Alexander the billionaire, who could bend the stock market with a word, walked past her in silence, his wedding ring glinting under the same light that made hers invisible. Their marriage had been written quite literally, in ink and claws, a contract of protection. He offered safety, she offered silence. At first, Bianca told herself she could live with that. After all, safety was a luxury for a girl who grew up dodging gunshots on the south side of Chicago. But as months passed, safety began to taste like captivity. She walked through the endless hallway, lined with portraits of stern-faced king's men who had built empires and broken hearts. Their eyes seemed to follow her, as though warning her of the lineage she had dared to enter. Every door in that house had a lock she didn't have the code to. Every window looked out to a world she wasn't allowed to touch. Even the garden, lush and overflowing with roses, was surrounded by iron gates that needed permission to open. At night, she could hear Alexander's footsteps echoing from his study. The rhythm was steady, restrained, like a man who'd learned to silence even his emotions. Sometimes she'd catch a glimpse of him through the half-open door, sleeves rolled up, whiskey in hand, staring at a single photograph on his desk. She'd never dared to ask who was in it. But tonight, something was different. The house was darker than usual. The wind howled through the cracks in the old mansion, carrying with it a faint note of melancholy, like a song half-remembered. Bianca couldn't sleep. Her thoughts clattered too loudly in the quiet. She decided to go downstairs to breathe, to remind herself she was still alive. She passed the piano room where no one played anymore, her fingers brushing the dust from the keys. Each note she pressed sounded like a sigh. Then from the study she heard his voice. Alexander rarely used his phone at home. He valued privacy more than peace, and both were hard-earned in his world. But his voice, low sharp, carried through the thin crack of the door. Keep everything sealed. No one must know who she is. Bianca froze. Yes, even her. She can't know. It's safer that way. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. For a moment she thought she'd misheard, but the pause that followed the heavy, exhausted silence confirmed it. He wasn't talking about business. He was talking about her. She backed away the silk of her gown, whispering against the marble. Her mind spun. What did he mean she can't know? Know what? The house suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. Every secret she'd ignored, every strange glance, every door locked behind her, came rushing back like a wave she couldn't outrun. She slipped into the kitchen, her breathing uneven. Manuela, the old housekeeper, stirred sugar into her tea and looked up in surprise. Mrs. Bianca, she corrected herself quickly. You should be resting. It's late. I couldn't sleep, Bianca murmured, avoiding the woman's eyes. I thought maybe some tea. Manuela hesitated, then poured a second cup. He worries about you, you know. Mr. King. But worry in men like him looks like control. Bianca gave a brittle smile. Control looks a lot like prison, Manuela. The older woman sighed, pressing the warm porcelain into her hands. Then maybe you should ask what he's trying to keep you safe from. Bianca wanted to ask, but she knew Manuela wouldn't answer. No one ever did. When she returned upstairs, Alexander's study door was ajar. The light was still on. He was sitting behind his desk, tie loosened, jaw tense. When he looked up, his eyes blue as Winter softened slightly. "You're awake," he said, as if stating a fact, not a question. "So are you?" she replied. He gestured toward the chair across from him. "Come here." She sat careful to keep her distance. Alexander leaned back, studying her face, with that same unreadable calm. "You've been quiet lately." "I've had time to think," she said evenly. "A lot of it." His lips quirked. "That sounds dangerous." "Maybe it is." She met his gaze. "Alexander, what exactly am I to you?" He didn't answer right away. His fingers drummed once against the desk. Then he said softly, "You're someone I can't afford to lose." The words should have warmed her, but they didn't. They felt like another kind of cage. "And if losing me means I find myself again?" she asked. His expression changed just slightly, but enough. "Don't say things you don't mean, Bianca." She rose from the chair. "I've said nothing but the truth since the day you made me yours, made you mine." His voice sharpened. "You think I forced this?" "I think," she whispered, "you needed someone to hide behind, and I was convenient." For the first time, she saw something raw flicker across his face. Pain, maybe. Regret. But before either could speak again, his phone rang. He turned away to answer. "Yes." "What about the transfer?" "No, she doesn't know. And she can't understand." That was all Bianca needed to hear. She left the study without a word. Outside, snow had begun to fall again, thick, silent, suffocating. She pressed her palm against the cold window, her reflection blurred by frost. She can't know. The words replayed like a curse. If he wasn't protecting her, then what truth was he protecting from her? She went to her room, but sleep refused her. The walls felt closer than before. A distant rumble of thunder broke the stillness out of place for Winter. A storm was coming. She could feel it in her bones. Bianca stood by the mirror, her own eyes staring back, questioning, trembling. The reflection of a woman half owned, half lost. She whispered to herself, "Maybe it's time I find out what he's afraid of." Downstairs in his study, Alexander poured another glass of whiskey. His hand shook for the first time in years. On his desk lay a small photograph, the one Bianca had never seen. It was of a woman who looked like her. Same deep eyes, same half smile, but older. He traced the edge of the picture with his thumb and whispered, "I promised her I'd keep you safe." Then, from the darkness beyond the window, a pair of headlights flashed once, then disappeared. He reached for his phone, the color draining from his face. Incoming message. "We found her. The girl who looks like your wife." Alexander froze. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. And upstairs, Bianca, unable to sleep, heard the sound of breaking glass echo through the mansion like a warning. She didn't know it yet, but that single message would unravel everything: who he was, who she was, and the truth about the woman in that photograph. Morning light slipped quietly through the tall windows of King Estate, painting the marble floors in streaks of pale gold. To an outsider, the mansion was a dream, a symphony of elegance, of power, of wealth, displayed in polished silence. To Bianca, it was a museum built to house her. The maids greeted her with polite smiles that never reached their eyes. The security team bowed their heads but watched her every move, as though she were a fragile piece of art that might suddenly shatter. Every door had a code she didn't know. Every hallway led to rooms she wasn't allowed to enter. And every night, Alexander locked his study. It was, she realized, The perfect prison, soft carpets, silver spoons, and invisible chains. At breakfast, she sat alone at a table that could seat 20. A vase of white lilies stood in the center, their scent heavy and sweet. Her reflection shimmered on the polished tableware. Perfect posture, perfect manners, perfectly miserable. She used to think freedom meant money, but now she knew better. Freedom was laughter echoing down cracked sidewalks, the sound of kids chasing each other through the alleys of South Chicago, her mother singing to the radio while cooking cheap pasta. Those memories had color. Here, everything was gold, and nothing was alive. Manuela, the old housekeeper, poured her coffee in silence. Bianca watched the steam rise and whispered, "It's strange, isn't it? You can have everything and still feel like nothing." Manuela didn't answer, but her eyes softened. Sometimes she said gently, "The richest prisons are the ones that look like heaven." That night, Bianca wandered into the music room again. The piano waited like an old friend she hadn't touched in years. She sat hesitating, then pressed one key. The note trembled soft, sad. Behind her, a low voice broke the quiet. "You play beautifully." She startled. Alexander was leaning against the doorway. Tie loosened, shirt sleeves rolled up, watching her with unreadable eyes. "I didn't know you listened," she murmured. "I listen to everything in this house," he said. His tone wasn't threatening, just true. Bianca turned back to the keys. "Then you must know how quiet it gets." He stepped closer. "I built this silence to keep you safe." Her fingers froze mid-note. Safe from what, Alexander? The world or you? His expression hardened, but there was something else beneath it. Fear. The kind that comes from knowing danger isn't outside the walls, but already inside them. He sat across from her, elbows on his knees, head bowed. "There are people who'd hurt you, to hurt me. You don't understand the kind of enemies I have." She studied him. In the half-light, his confidence seemed to crack. For the first time, she saw not a billionaire, not a legend, but a man haunted by ghosts. Later in their bedroom, Bianca stood before the window looking out at the endless acres of manicured perfection. The moonlight poured over the gardens like liquid glass. Somewhere far beyond the iron gates, a dog barked free and wild. Behind her, Alexander's reflection appeared in the window. He was silent, just watching her. "Why do you always look like you're somewhere else?" he asked softly. "Because I am," she replied. He moved closer, the air between them tightening. "If you step outside those gates without permission, I can't protect you." She turned to face him, her voice trembling with contained defiance. "Maybe I don't need your protection." "You do," he said firmly. "You have no idea what they're capable of." "Then tell me." His jaw tensed. He didn't. Instead, he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. His touch was gentle, almost reverent, but it carried the weight of unspoken guilt. "You think I'm your captor?" he said quietly. "But Bianca, I'm the one trapped here, not you." She held his gaze, searching for the truth in his eyes. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw it, a crack in the armor, a man desperate to believe his own lies. Days passed heavy with silence. The mansion became a rhythm. She couldn't escape breakfast, alone afternoon walks, under surveillance dinners without conversation. But the more Alexander tried to shield her, the more restless she became. One evening, she followed the faint hum of voices to the security room. The door was ajar. Inside, screens flickered live footage from every corner of the estate. Her stomach dropped when she saw her own image, on one of them walking in the garden, reading by the fountain, sleeping. Every moment of her life was recorded. "Don't," came a voice behind her. She turned. Alexander stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. Bianca pointed at the screens. "What is this protection?" he said simply. "Surveillance," she corrected. You're watching me like a threat. Because you are one. He snapped, then caught himself, voice lowering. Not to me, to them. Who are they? Alexander, she demanded. You keep saying them, but I never see anyone but you. He took a step forward. That's the point. She stared at him, her pulse racing. What are you hiding from me? His answer was quiet, almost tender. The truth. That night she dreamed of running, her bare feet hitting the cold marble doors, slamming alarms, wailing. When she woke, her throat was tight with tears. In the dim light, she saw Alexander sitting by the window, watching the sunrise. The tiredness in his posture looked ancient. Do you ever sleep? She asked hoarsely. He didn't look at her. I can't. Not when I see her face. Whose face? For a moment, he seemed to forget she was there. His voice was a whisper. The woman I couldn't save. Bianca felt a chill run through her. Someone you loved. He didn't answer, but his silence said enough. She rose from the bed and walked to him, her heart pounding with something between anger and empathy. Is that why you married me? Because I look like her? His head turned sharply, eyes meeting hers, wounded, defensive. You think that's what this is? I don't know what this is anymore, she said, voice breaking. A marriage, a deal, a memory you're trying to resurrect. He stood towering over her, his voice suddenly raw. I married you because you were the only thing that made sense when nothing else did. Bianca stepped back, her chest heaving. That's not love, Alexander. That's desperation. He flinched as if she'd struck him. Then, without another word, he left the room. Hours later, she found herself wandering the West Wing, a part of the mansion she was told never to enter. Dust covered everything, but one door stood slightly open. Inside was a room frozen in time, a vanity, with crystal perfume bottles, a faded blue dress hanging by the window, and on the wall a photograph. A woman smiling with the same dark eyes as Bianca. Her blood ran cold. The woman from the photo in his study. Beneath it, written in delicate cursive, Eleanor King. 1985, 2017. Bianca touched the glass, her reflection overlapping with the dead woman's. Their faces, nearly identical, merged into one. Behind her, the floor creaked. Now you understand, Alexander said quietly from the doorway. She turned, trembling. You think I'm her? I don't think, he said, voice cracking. I know what they think. Who are they? He walked toward her slowly. The men who killed Eleanor. The men who believe you didn't die with her. Bianca's heart stuttered. You mean they think I am her? He nodded once. And if they find you, they'll finish what they started. The truth hit her like a wave. Terrifying, impossible. Yet suddenly everything made sense. The locks, the guards, the eyes that followed her. But before she could speak, a phone buzzed in his pocket. Alexander's expression changed as he read the screen tightening, darkening. He met her eyes. They've found someone in Chicago. A woman who looks just like you. Bianca felt the ground tilt beneath her. But that's impossible. It's not, he said. If they think you're alive, they'll come for both of you. Both. The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Alexander, she whispered. Who is she? Looked away. That's what I'm trying to find out. Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon, though the sky was clear. The storm had arrived, quiet, invisible, waiting. And as Bianca stared at the woman's photograph, a single thought began to form, sharp and frightening. What if I'm not who I think I am? Morning rose like a secret, A thin veil of mist crawled across the grounds of King Estate, softening the iron fences and swallowing the world in pale light. Bianca stood by the window watching the fog curl like smoke around the gates, freedom just beyond the glass. For days the thought had haunted her. Ever since discovering the photograph of Eleanor King, the dead woman who shared her face, the mansion had begun to feel like it was breathing against her skin. The walls knew too much. The silence pressed too close. And this morning something inside her finally broke. She dressed quietly. Jeans, a wool coat, a scarf pulled high enough to shadow her features. Her wedding ring she left on the nightstand, its gold gleam a ghost she didn't want to carry. Manuela caught her in the hallway holding a tray of breakfast. "Where are you going?" "Mrs." The woman stopped herself, but Bianca heard the tremor in her voice. "Out," Bianca said. "Just for air." "You know he wouldn't. I'm not asking." Manuela's eyes softened, then darted to the security camera above the door. She sighed, whispered the back gate code under her breath, and stepped aside. "Run fast," she murmured, "before the cameras turn back." Bianca didn't look back. The city felt like another planet. New York at mid-morning was chaos, car horns, laughter vendors shouting. Bianca stood on the sidewalk half terrified, half elated. For the first time in months, she wasn't being watched. She could smell life again, roasted chestnuts, coffee rain on concrete. She ducked into a small cafe on Lexington. The waitress smiled like she wasn't invisible. Bianca ordered black coffee and a blueberry muffin, savoring the simple rebellion of choosing for herself. But freedom, she learned quickly, came with its own kind of fear. A man at a corner table lowered his newspaper just long enough to glance at her. Another outside smoking by the curb lingered too long before turning away. It might have been nothing. Or maybe it was them, the faceless men Alexander warned her about. She sipped her coffee, pretending not to notice, pretending she wasn't shaking. When she stepped outside again, the air had turned colder. It happened at the crosswalk. A scream, high, desperate, tore through the hum of traffic. A woman stumbled onto the sidewalk, clutching her purse, chased by a man in a hood. Instinct moved faster than fear. Bianca lunged forward, grabbing the man's arm and twisting it back, the way she'd once seen Alexander's guards do. He cursed, released the purse, and fled. The crowd erupted into applause. The woman, middle-aged, shaking, clutched Bianca's hands. "Thank you." "God bless you," Bianca forced a smile, her heart still pounding. Someone in the crowd raised a phone. A click, a flash, then another. She didn't notice. Not yet. But somewhere in Manhattan, Alexander King's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, attached a photo. She's outside, alone. By the time she returned to the estate that afternoon, the fog had burned away, leaving the sky cold and sharp. The front doors opened before she could reach them. Alexander stood there, coat unbuttoned, eyes dark with fury. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. His silence was louder. "Where were you?" Bianca's voice trembled. "Out." He stepped closer. "Out where?" "In the city. I needed air. Air." His laugh was quiet and dangerous. "You needed air, so you walked into the one place I can't protect you. I'm not your prisoner, Alexander. Then stop acting like my death wish." His words hit like a slap. "You think this is about control," he continued, pacing, now his composure cracking. "You think I built these walls because I like keeping you here. Every time you leave, they move closer. You don't see it, but I do. You just made me choose between loving you and keeping you alive." She stared at him, her throat tight. "And which one did you choose?" He stopped. The question cut through the anger like a knife. He looked at her, something unspoken flickering in his eyes. Love, fear, exhaustion, all tangled together. "Both," he whispered. "God help me, both." That night, the house felt heavier. Dinner was untouched. The maids retreated early. The only sound was the rain against the windows. Bianca stood in the library watching the storm. Her reflection stared back from the glass-tired hollow, questioning. Behind her, Alexander's footsteps approached. "You could have died today," he said, voice low. "I saved someone," she replied. "That's not dying, that's living." He closed his eyes as if her words hurt him. "You don't understand how dangerous this is. Then explain it to me. Stop treating me like a child in a cage." He turned away. "I can't." She stepped closer. "Then maybe I'll keep leaving until you can." He spun toward her. "Don't you get it? I'm trying to keep you safe because I already failed once." The confession silenced the room. She blinked, heart pounding. "Failed who?" He hesitated. "Someone who looked like you." "Eleanor," she whispered. His jaw tightened. "So that's it," she said softly. "I'm your second chance." He reached for her, but she stepped back. "No. You don't get to love me because she's gone. I'm not." "Yes, you are. You're protecting her memory, not me." The storm outside crashed against the glass. For a moment, lightning lit the room, and she saw the truth in his eyes, guilt carved deep and permanent. Then quietly he said, "If you leave again, I won't chase you." Bianca looked up, surprised. "But I can't promise they won't." Sleep didn't come. Bianca sat on the edge of the bed, watching the shadows shift across the ceiling. His words replayed in her mind. "I won't chase you, but they will." The thought should have scared her. Instead, it steadied her resolve. If she wanted answers, she couldn't find them behind locked doors. She rose, crossed to the window, and pulled the curtains aside. The storm had stopped. The world beyond was washed clean silver with moonlight. Somewhere out there was the truth about Eleanor, about the men hunting her, about Alexander's past. She whispered into the quiet, "I'm done hiding." Downstairs, Alexander watched the same moon from his study window. On his desk lay a photograph, the one of Eleanor, and beside it, a new one. Bianca in the city, holding the rescued woman's hands, caught mid-smile. A chill rippled through him. The message that came with it replayed in his mind. She's outside, alone. And beneath it, a second one had arrived an hour later. We know she's not Eleanor, but we also know who she really is. Alexander's hand froze on the desk. The glass of whiskey trembled. He looked up toward the staircase, toward the room where Bianca slept unaware. The silence of the house returned, heavy and absolute. But outside, hidden beyond the gates, a figure watched through binoculars, eyes cold and patient. He lifted his phone, dialed a number, and whispered into the receiver. She's exactly where he keeps her. The wife who was never supposed to exist. The night was restless. Wind scraped against the windows, bending the trees until they groaned. Inside the dining room, the table glowed beneath soft amber light, a perfect illusion of calm. Bianca sat opposite Alexander, her fork idle over a half-touched meal. For weeks since the attack, the mansion had been quieter than ever, but peace had started to feel like the pause before thunder. Alexander poured wine into her glass. "You're quiet tonight." "So are you," she replied. Their eyes met, a fragile truce, forged in silence. The wound on her arm had long healed, but what lingered between them was deeper, invisible. He watched her like a man trying to memorize something he feared losing. She felt it too, that trembling awareness that love once spoken could destroy everything it touched. Then came the first sound, distant, like a door slamming. A second later, the glass wall behind them exploded. The world fractured into chaos. Bianca screamed as shards rained over the table. Alexander was already moving, dragging her to the floor, his body shielding hers. Down, he shouted, voice raw. "Don't look." But she did. Through the smoke and glittering wreckage, she saw him, a man in black face, half covered, a long scar cutting across his left cheek. That scar, she'd seen it before, in a faded photograph buried in Alexander's desk. The masked man fired again. Bullets shattered the chandelier. The air filled with the smell of gunpowder and fear. Alexander pulled Bianca toward the hallway, one arm locked around her waist. His breath was harsh, his movements precise, practiced like a man who had lived this moment before. Guards burst in through the side doors, shouting commands, but the intruder was already gone, swallowed by the night. Silence came back, slowly trembling. Bianca sat on the marble floor, shards glinting around her like broken stars. Her hands shook as Alexander crouched before her, brushing glass from her hair. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No," she whispered. "Are you?" He didn't answer. His hand was bleeding, a thin crimson line cutting across his palm. He ignored it, staring instead at the shattered glass, the dark beyond the window. Bianca followed his gaze. "You knew this would happen." He said nothing. "Didn't you?" She pressed, voice breaking. "Who was that man?" Alexander's jaw tightened. "Someone who shouldn't exist anymore." Her pulse quickened. "He had a scar. I've seen him before. In that photo on your desk." "Don't," he cut in sharply. "Don't go looking for ghosts." She rose to her feet, trembling but defiant. "Ghosts don't shoot at us, Alexander." His eyes snapped to hers, blue burning. For a moment, the mask he wore in front of the world slipped, and she saw what lay beneath: guilt, grief, and something darker. Finally, he spoke, voice barely audible. "I hurt someone once. I thought it ended there. But pain doesn't vanish. It waits." Who was he? Alexander's throat moved a swallowed memory. "My brother." The word landed between them like thunder. Later in the study, the truth came in fragments. Years ago, Alexander King had built his empire with ruthless precision. His brother Adrian had helped the quiet genius behind the numbers. But when greed outgrew loyalty, one of them had to fall. Alexander chose survival. Adrian chose revenge. He was presumed dead after a fire Alexander never spoke of again. Now he was back. Bianca listened, her heart thudding, the shadows of the room deepening around them. "So he's come to kill you?" Alexander nodded. "Or worse." She stared at him. "And me?" His gaze lifted to meet hers, raw, unguarded. "You're what he'll use to finish it." Something inside her cracked. "Then stop pretending I need protection. I'm not your weakness." He stepped closer. "You are exactly that." His voice trembled, low and desperate. "Do you think I don't see what happens when I look at you? Every time I try to protect you, it's not because I think you're fragile. It's because I know I am." Bianca's breath hitched. "Then let me fight with you." He shook his head. "I won't risk you." She reached for his bleeding hand, wrapped her fingers over the wound. "Maybe you already have." Rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, washing the blood from his skin, streaking down the windows like tears. "Alexander," she said quietly, "you can't bury your past and call it love." He looked at her, haunted. "And you can't save a man who's already damned." They stood there, caught in the storm's reflection, two souls bound by something too fierce to name. Finally, Bianca whispered, "If I'm what he wants, use me." Alexander's eyes widened. "What you said, he'll come for me. Then let him. Draw him out." He grabbed her wrist, his grip trembling. Absolutely not. Then how does this end? She demanded. You hide me forever. Wait until he kills you first. She stepped closer, her voice barely above a breath. You once told me fear keeps us alive. But maybe it's also what's killing you. He stared at her, torn between rage and awe. Outside, lightning tore through the sky, illuminating her face. Fierce, beautiful, resolute. For a fleeting second, he saw Eleanor's ghost fade completely, leaving only Bianca standing there unflinching. Let me help you, she said again, softer now. Not because you owe me the truth, but because I deserve to fight for it. Alexander closed his eyes. His hand rose to her cheek, trembling. You have no idea what he's capable of. Bianca leaned into his touch. Then show me what you are. The storm raged deep into the night. Guards combed the estate. Security lights cut through the gardens. But inside, in that quiet space between fear and surrender, something shifted. For the first time, Alexander stopped pretending he could protect her by keeping her small. For the first time, Bianca stopped running from the shadows of his past. Love, it seemed, wasn't the opposite of danger. It was choosing to face it together. He pressed his forehead to hers, breath unsteady. If you stand by me now, he whispered, there's no turning back. There never was, she murmured. He kissed her, not with hunger, but with apology, the kind that carried every word he could never say. Outside, thunder rolled again, and far beyond the mansion gates, a figure stood under the rain watching. Adrian King smiled, touching the scar that split his cheek. Little brother, he whispered into the storm, you took everything from me once. Let's see what you're willing to lose this time. The rain drowned his footsteps as he vanished into the dark. The morning after the attack, the world felt wrong. The mansion, once a fortress of quiet wealth, was now surrounded by silence that cut deeper than fear. Broken glass still glittered in the corners, a reminder of the night that had cracked everything open. Bianca walked through the hallway barefoot, her reflection following her in the long mirrors. She no longer recognized the woman staring back, half wife, half prisoner, all questions. In the study, she found a folder left carelessly on Alexander's desk. Inside, pages of contracts, photographs, press clippings. Her own name, Bianca Brown, printed next to the words, Confidential Marriage Agreement. Subject to non-disclosure. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages. Clause 1, marriage to begin within 30 days of the media leak. Clause 2, compensation to be determined annually. Clause 3, public appearance prohibited. Her breath caught. A news clipping slid free from the folder. Billionaire Alexander King linked to scandal involving actress Eleanor Raines. It wasn't love that had begun their story. It was damage control. When Alexander found her, hours later, the contract lay open on the desk. Bianca. Don't, she said, voice hollow. Don't call my name like it means something. He froze. You married me to bury your scandal, she whispered, to clean your name with a lie. It wasn't like that, he said, stepping closer. She laughed, soft, broken. Then what was it? Charity, strategy, penance, survival, he said. Back then, the company was under attack. I had enemies, waiting for blood, and the press. Stop, she interrupted. You could have chosen anyone. Why me? He hesitated. Because you were real. Real, she snapped. Or replaceable. The word hit like a slap. Alexander's composure faltered. You think this was easy for me, I think, Bianca said quietly. It was easy enough to lie. For a long time, neither spoke. The truth hung between them, ugly, heavy, irreversible. When he finally reached for her, she stepped back. Don't, she whispered. You can't touch me with the same hands that signed that paper. That night, she packed in silence. A single suitcase, her mother's old sketchbook, and the memories she couldn't tear apart. Alexander watched from the doorway, eyes hollow. Where will you go? Somewhere you don't own. Bianca, please. She turned, tears shining but unfallen. You can buy a marriage, Alexander, but not forgiveness. He took a step forward, voice breaking. I never meant for it to become this. I never expected to love me, she finished. He didn't answer. Maybe that's the only truth between us, she said. When she left, he didn't follow. For once, he kept his promise. 3 months later, Chicago smelled of snow and paint. Bianca's life had shrunk beautifully. Small apartment, small paycheck, big peace. She taught art to children at a community center on the South Side, where color replaced silence and laughter had no price tag. Some days, she caught herself sketching him without meaning, to the slope of his jaw, the sadness behind his eyes. She'd tear the page out every time. Love, she'd learned, was not the same as belonging. But love, like winter, had a way of coming back. It was late afternoon when she saw him again. Snow fell in slow spirals, covering the cracked pavement outside the center. Through the window, she spotted a man standing in the street coat. Dusted white head bowed as if the cold were a penance. Alexander. He didn't knock. He just stood there, as if unsure he had the right. Bianca stepped outside. The air bit at her skin. Snow clung to her lashes. For a long time, neither spoke. Then his voice, hoarse, human, broke the silence. I once signed a contract to protect my name, he said. But somewhere along the way, I realized my name meant nothing without yours. Bianca's heart clenched. He took a slow breath, snow melting in his hair. The world thinks power comes from control, but you made me lose control and find myself in the same breath. She didn't speak. She couldn't. I told myself I could build a life on strategy, he continued, but it wasn't until you left that I understood what I built wasn't a life. It was a prison. And you were the only part of it that was real. Bianca's eyes filled, her voice, soft but steady. Why now, Alexander? Why here? He smiled faintly, eyes glistening. Because I needed to see the woman I destroyed and hoped she could still look at me. She studied him, the man who once owned the world, but now looked like he'd give it all back for one more moment of her trust. You hurt me, she said. I know. You lied. I did. Then why am I not walking away? His breath caught. Because you still love me. She hesitated, snow swirling between them. Love doesn't erase betrayal. No, he said quietly, but maybe it can forgive it. For a moment, neither moved. The city hummed around them, cars passing, children laughing inside the center. The world went on, indifferent to two people standing in the snow, rewriting the ending they never got right. Finally, Bianca stepped forward, her gloved hand lifting to his face. Her touch was gentle, tentative, as if she were tracing the man beneath the guilt. Alexander? She whispered, you don't need to ask for forgiveness. He blinked, confused. Because real love doesn't start with apology, she said. It starts with truth. Her hand lingered on his cheek, her breath fogging in the cold. So if you came here for forgiveness, you have it. But if you came here for me, you'll have to earn that again. Tears rimmed his eyes. Then I'll spend the rest of my life doing just that. She smiled faintly. We'll see. And for the first time in months, she didn't turn away. Later, as the snow deepened, they walked together in silence through the empty park nearby. The world around them was hushed blank, waiting to be written again. Bianca glanced at him. What will you do now? Start over, he said, with or without my empire. Maybe build something honest this time, she nodded, tucking her hands into her coat. Start with yourself. Alexander looked at her, something soft breaking through the cold. Will you help me? She smiled, small, uncertain, real. We'll see where forgiveness takes us. That night after he left, Bianca sat by the window of her tiny apartment. The city lights glimmered like constellations reflected on wet asphalt. She thought of everything they'd been: strangers, partners, deceivers, lovers, and how sometimes love didn't heal you. It simply gave you the courage to heal yourself. She closed her eyes, whispering into the quiet. Maybe this time, we'll get it right. Outside, beneath the falling snow, a black car idled across the street. Inside, a man watched through the windshield, his face hidden by shadow. He lifted a phone, spoke into it softly. She's back in play, and he's with her. The call ended. The car drove away into the dark, leaving only the echo of tires against snow, and the promise that the past was not done with them yet. A year later, the snow had long melted, and so had the distance between them. What began as penance had turned into purpose. Together, they built something that mattered: the King Brown Foundation, a sanctuary for women of color, seeking freedom, education, and the chance to begin again. On the morning of the launch, Chicago was painted gold with spring light. Reporters filled the glass atrium, cameras flashing like the pulse of a living city. Yet, amid the noise, Bianca stood calm, radiant, grounded, wearing a simple cream dress and the quiet confidence of someone who had rebuilt her life, brick by brick. Alexander stood at the back of the hall watching her. He didn't belong to the front page anymore, and for once he didn't need to. The empire could have his name. She had his heart. When Bianca stepped up to the podium, the crowd hushed. Her voice carried not as an echo of pain, but as the sound of someone who had transformed it. A few years ago, she began, I was treated like an asset. My worth measured in silence and obedience. But today I choose a different kind of wealth, one built on courage, education, and the freedom to dream. A murmur of applause swept the room. She continued, eyes bright with emotion. This foundation isn't about me or Alexander. It's about every woman who ever believed she wasn't enough, every girl who was told to wait her turn. You don't have to wait anymore. The words seemed to hum in the air. Even the cameras paused, as if the story unfolding before them deserved reverence, not spectacle. From the back, Alexander watched, not as a savior, but as a student. He remembered the man he'd been: arrogant, terrified of loss, blind to his own cruelty. And yet here she was, turning every wound he'd caused into a seed of healing for others. When she looked at him across the crowd, their eyes met, and for the first time, there was no anger, no apology, only light. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and cameras clicked, Bianca slipped away to the garden terrace behind the hall. She needed a moment to breathe. The air smelled of magnolia and rain, the kind that whispered of new beginnings. She heard the soft tread of footsteps behind her. Escaping your own party, Alexander's voice was gentler than she remembered. She smiled, faintly. Just catching my breath. You know how I feel about crowds. He stepped closer, careful not to intrude. You were extraordinary in there. I was honest, she said. That's different. He nodded. Honesty looks good on you. Does redemption look good on you? She countered, turning toward him. He chuckled softly. I'm still trying it on. Their laughter met somewhere in the middle, hesitant, familiar, real. For a long moment, they stood side by side, watching the city stretch toward the horizon. I used to think, Alexander said quietly, that power meant control, that if I could control everything, people, outcomes, even love, I'd never lose. And now, he exhaled, now I know real power is letting go. Bianca looked at him, the wind catching her curls. You did let go of your empire, your pride. He smiled ruefully. And I got you back. You didn't get me back, she corrected softly. You earned me. Something in his expression shifted. Gratitude, reverence, something beyond words. Inside, a journalist called her name for an interview, but she stayed. For this moment, she chose peace over performance. I never thanked you, Alexander said after a pause. For forgiving me. For showing me what it means to start over. Bianca shook her head. You didn't need my forgiveness, Alexander. You needed your own. He looked at her, the truth of it cutting through the years between them. You were right, he said. Love doesn't begin with an apology. She smiled, a hint of warmth in her eyes. But it survives because of one. As dusk fell, the city lights began to shimmer across the river. Volunteers and guests started leaving, their laughter fading into the night. Alexander turned toward her. Bianca, he said quietly, you've built something extraordinary. But you know this foundation, this dream, it started with you. She tilted her head. And you. He smiled. Maybe. But you gave it meaning. For a while they simply watched the lights flicker below, tiny stars reflected on glass and water. It struck her that life, like the city, was most beautiful when viewed from a distance. Chaos and order, pain and grace coexisting perfectly. Later that evening, during the private dinner with close supporters, Alexander raised his glass. To the woman who taught me that love isn't ownership, it's partnership. And to every woman who refuses to let fear define her worth. Bianca's eyes glistened. She didn't need to speak. The pride in her gaze said everything. The room erupted in applause, but neither of them heard it. For the first time, the noise of the world no longer drowned out what mattered. After everyone had gone, Bianca returned to the stage alone. The banners fluttered softly above her King Brown foundation, where dreams begin again. She traced the edge of the podium with her hand, thinking of the girl she once was trapped in, silk, defined by a man's name. That girl was gone, but she had left behind something stronger, the will to rise. Behind her, Alexander approached quietly. He didn't interrupt. He just stood there watching her with a look that held no possession, only awe. She turned to him, eyes shining. We did it. He smiled. You did. Bianca stepped closer, closing the small space between them. Then why do you look like a man who's about to lose something again? He hesitated. Because every time I see you like this, I realize I don't deserve to stand beside you. She shook her head gently. No one earns light, Alexander. We just choose to stop standing in the dark. He laughed quietly, emotion rough in his throat. Then maybe this time I'll choose right. You already did, she said, and for the first time she believed it. Outside, fireworks bloomed over the Chicago skyline, a celebration planned by the Foundation's team. But to Bianca, it felt like the universe had timed it, just for them. The bursts reflected in her eyes as she whispered, "This is what healing looks like." Alexander looked at her, the woman who had once been his secret and was now his redemption. He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally, effortlessly. "Then let's protect it," he murmured. Together, she said. The fireworks faded, leaving only starlight. Somewhere beyond the city, a car slowed to a stop on a quiet road. Inside, a figure sat in the shadows listening to a radio report about the King Brown Foundation's success. The man's lips curved into a thin smile. How poetic, he muttered. My brother saving the world with the woman I once saved from him. He turned off the radio. The night swallowed his words. The chandeliers glittered like captured stars above the ballroom of the Global Humanity Awards. Guests in tailored suits and shimmering gowns murmured in admiration as Alexander King, once the ruthless mogul, now the face of redemption, walked toward the stage. It had been a year since the King Brown Foundation launched, and tonight he was to receive the title Humanitarian Entrepreneur of the Year. Cameras flashed, journalists whispered, but Alexander heard none of it. All he could see was Bianca seated in the front row, her dark skin glowing beneath the lights, her smile calm, almost knowing. He climbed the final step, holding a folded document, instead of the speech everyone expected. The air shifted. He adjusted the microphone, looked at the audience, and then at her. I was supposed to read a statement, he began, his voice low, deliberate. But tonight, I brought something else, a different kind of contract. The crowd stilled. Even the reporters lowered their cameras. He unfolded the paper. Term, lifetime. Value, priceless. Position, Mrs. Bianca King. A collective gasp swept through the room, then silence. Bianca's eyes filled before she could stop them. The hall that once represented wealth and power suddenly felt like a chapel sacred fragile. Alexander's voice softened. I once signed contracts to protect my empire. This is the first one I've ever signed to surrender it for love. Bianca rose slowly, her heartbeat loud in her ears. Every step toward him felt like walking through the years they had broken and rebuilt each other. When she reached the stage, Alexander extended his hand. Their fingers met, warm, trembling, real. The applause came late, as if the entire hall had forgotten how to breathe. Tears slipped down Bianca's cheeks, but her smile was radiant. She whispered just loud enough for him to hear. You kept your promise. He leaned closer, voice shaking. You made it worth keeping. The crowd erupted, cameras flashing like fireworks. But in that golden moment, it was just them two souls, once bound by deception, now joined by truth. The paper in his hand fluttered as he let it fall, landing at their feet like an old life finally released. Later that night, they stood on the rooftop of the hotel away from the noise below. The city stretched endlessly, glittering alive. Bianca leaned on the railing, her gown swaying gently in the cool breeze. You didn't have to do that, she said. I did, he replied. The old me would have kept loving you in silence. The new me wanted the world to know who you are, who you've always been. Bianca looked out over the skyline. You realize that wasn't just a romantic gesture. It was a statement. He smiled faintly. Good. Let it be one. She turned to face him fully. You're not afraid anymore. Of losing you, he paused. Always. But fear doesn't make the rules anymore. Love does. For a moment, they simply stood there. No titles, no contracts, no secrets. The stars above seemed almost close enough to touch. Bianca took his hand. Do you ever think about how we started every day? And you're not ashamed I am, he said honestly. But shame only means I've learned. You taught me that. She smiled, her thumb tracing the back of his hand. And you taught me that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without pain. He gazed at her for a long moment. Then maybe we're finally free. Down below, the city lights blurred in her vision. Alexander, she whispered, what if we fail again? He chuckled softly. Then we'll build again. This time with truth as the foundation. Bianca rested her head against his shoulder. That's a foundation worth keeping. Hours later, the ballroom was empty, except for a few staff cleaning up the remnants of the celebration. The banner that had read Humanitarian of the Year hung crookedly, half-shadowed. But it didn't matter. The true story had already been written, not on paper, but in hearts that finally understood love's quiet language. Alexander approached Bianca with a glass of champagne. "To us," he said. She tilted her head. "To the future." He smiled. "To a love without terms." They clinked glasses, and for once, there was no pretense, no stage, no spotlight, no past chasing them. Just two people who had learned that real love doesn't erase mistakes. It transforms them. Before they left, Bianca walked back to the stage. On the floor lay the paper's slightly crumpled ink, smudged by the touch of her tears. She picked it up gently. "You know," she said softly, "you didn't have to write this, to prove anything." Alexander walked up beside her. It wasn't proof, he said. It was a promise. One that doesn't expire. Bianca looked up at him. The man she once feared, then fought, then forgave. "Then I'll sign it too." She pulled a pen from her clutch, and beneath his name, wrote hers in neat, deliberate strokes. Bianca Brown King. The sound of her pen scratching across the paper was quiet, but it echoed louder than any applause they'd ever received. When she finished, Alexander cupped her face in his hands. "Now it's official." She smiled through her tears. No contracts, no lies, just faith. He kissed her slow and certain under the fading glow of the chandeliers. Outside, dawn began to creep through the windows, light spilling across marble floors, touching the discarded roses, the empty glasses. The paper that had once symbolized everything false but now meant everything true. Love doesn't erase differences. It gives us the courage to face them. It asks not for perfection, but for persistence. If this story touched you, love someone, not by holding them tighter, but by making sure they can still breathe freely beside you.